And that leads me to the second film. Oppenheimer style, which I saw with a very different crowd, being my grandfather. I mentioned this last time, but he took me to it when we had to cut Oppenheimer out of our anniversary date because of scheduling things, but like coordination with friends and stuff like that. But I ended up seeing it with my grandfather because he wanted to go see it because he met J. Robert Oppenheimer a year before his death. My grandfather is technically, I guess, is a what is he? An acoustic physicist? I don't know if it was specifically in acoustics. He's a physicist. And he went to Berkeley. Did he study at Berkeley? I want to say he did. He studied at Berkeley, and while he was there, Oppenheimer came to speak in the 60s, I want to say. A couple years, I think literally a year before his death, he said. And he wanted to go see it because it's always an interesting story, and I was like, yeah, I'll go with you. I'm down to clown. So Oppenheimer. Absolutely tremendous movie. Really incredible. It's kind of hard to say a lot about it because the movie as a whole, it's hard to say a lot just on my own, right? I do this podcast by myself. This is a really interesting movie to talk to someone about. And we had a very nice conversation about it following the movie after we got out. It proposes a lot of, it brings up a lot of really interesting ethical conundrums and is a very interesting picture of one of the most important people who's ever lived on the planet Earth, J. Robert Oppenheimer. I don't even feel like I should... Do I need to introduce it? It's about the man who led the Manhattan Project that created the first atomic bomb. Well, the first one that was detonated, at least. And it's extreme. Well, I don't know. Where do I even start with this movie? It's weird to say spoilers. Okay, there was some spoilers is like fair, at least in my experience. I feel like I could have been spoiled on this movie because this movie is not. It's a lot of people would say, oh, it's about the atomic bomb. It's not about the atomic bomb. Really, it's about Robert Oppenheimer. It's about Oppenheimer, the man, and his life and who he was, and the various perspectives on him. A lot of the movie is told through framing devices of characters talking about things in the past and their experiences with him. And you are seeing so spoilers, sort of. You never see Hiroshima, you never see Nagasaki, you only see the Trinity bomb test, the first detonation ever, as far as we can tell, as far as I know. Maybe there was a secret one that the Russians did. I'm not familiar enough with history to know that. You only see the Trinity test. The majority of the film is about the life of Oppenheimer and his struggles professionally and in his personal life, and what a very complex person he was. There is a lot that when I looked it up afterwards was left out, but I was only really left out for, I think, brevity's sake. But usually included in some form, but like in a condensed way. Like, instead of there being so many people involved in this, we're going to cut it down to like this many people and just combine some roles and stuff like that because it's not too important. There's a lot of stuff about his life that I did not realize, that I did not know, and he was a very interesting man. A lot of it is his moral conundrum between... So, there's this meme that's going on about, like, oh, Oppenheimer, when the bomb he made to kill people kills people? What? And that's not really fair. I get that it's a meme, but I hope that no one really takes it seriously, because that was not at all what the situation was. the film and the real history brings up a very grim reality of progress and science. I was watching a lot of interviews about this movie after I got home, and I watched one with Christopher Nolan where he was talking about, I think it was this great French interview. It was in English, but it had like a French audio track and all that. It was a French production. And he was talking about how for the scientists who worked on this project, there was never going to be a world with no atomic bomb or any atomic weaponry. Atomic power is just a part of nature. It's a rule of the universe. It's a thing that can happen. It is as natural as the physics that make a bullet come out of a gun. It's as natural as the forces that create fire in a flamethrower. So if it is absolutely inevitable that these horrible weapons of mass destruction will exist. They will exist. There is no questioning it. We don't have a choice about whether or not we should make an atomic... It's not a choice of whether or not an atomic bomb should exist. It's about who should have it first. And the decision that they made, which is, you could debate all day, is that America should have it first. You could probably... I think most people would agree it's better that the Nazis did not have a bomb first. So it's this kind of horrible reality that he lives in, that he is forced to, that also the other scientists working on this are forced to, their hands have been forced, that they have to ensure that an entity that they at least somewhat trust in the United States has the bomb before anyone else does. And they get to set the precedent for what it is so that people understand its power and how they should be used. And oftentimes that's the answer is not great. The results of that are not great. They are not satisfying. A large portion of the last half of this movie is about the horrible guilt and reality that he has to face, that he is responsible for this, for unleashing this in the world. And there's an element of like, well, if I hadn't, someone else would have. But he still did it, and he says at one point that the blood is really on, he feels like he has blood on his hands. That he was responsible for it. That he was ultimately the one who did it. So there's a lot of very heavy questions about when there's no good option here, so what should you do? And I think it's made more interesting by the fact that Oppenheimer himself was a very flawed man in his personal life. That dude loved cheating on his wife. That was like his favorite thing ever. And his wife, who's Emily Blunt in the movie, God bless her. God bless her, she stuck by him through everything. She gave him way more patience than I would have. Fuck. That's one of the lessons I walked out from, is Oppenheimer's wife, Kitty Oppenheimer, was a fucking champ. Jesus Christ. I felt very bad for her throughout the movie. She is stressed out as shit, dealing with her kids and raising kids, and her husband, who's just kind of like a weirdo. She loves him, but he's a weirdo, and I feel a lot for her. And ultimately she comes through and sticks up for him, where maybe he didn't deserve it, honestly, from her. Yeah. I should fucking talk about... No, there is no 20-minute sex scene in Oppenheimer. What the fuck? I don't even know where she got that from. I don't even understand. I was looking up, like, where this came from. I couldn't find anything about a 20-minute scene. I found out there was a TikTok of someone who claimed to have been at an early screening and described, a 15-minute full penetration sex scene. That's not 20. I don't know where she got that number from. But that's not true. And no, the Oppenheimer sex theory is not how it is in the movie. It lasts like maybe 2 minutes, and most of it is not sex. They're having sex for perhaps the first 5 seconds of it. And then it like stops and they're just naked. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. I've heard a little bit of criticism of that scene, and I find it really funny because, so the way that scene plays out, I guess this is sort of spoilers, is Florence Pugh, who's playing, at this point, they're just kind of like a fling before he met his wife, and then he later cheated on his wife with her again. They're having sex, and then she stops sex to get up to look at his bookshelf and talk, and she opens the bookshelf, and she's like, or she takes out a book, and it's the Bhagavad Gita? Is that what it is? Is that the Hindu? No, I'm totally... The Veda. Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is what it looks like it's called. Or the Veda. There's a lot of Hindu texts. She takes out the one that the line is from, the famous line is from, and she asks him to read a passage and tell her what it means. And it's like hilarious. It's like, why the fuck is this? Okay. Apparently, I have never... The only Christopher Nolan movie I've watched before this is Batman Begins. Apparently, Christopher Nolan is sort of famous for never having had a single sex scene in his movie and no real nudity at all. He is just not into it. But he felt the need... I was looking this up. He felt the need to include sex in the movie because Oppenheimer's womanizing was part of his moral character, and he thought that it was important. This scene strikes me, despite being very silly, it feels like Nolan was like, I have to write a sex scene. I should write a sex scene, right? Where should I include it? Oh, it would have one with the lady that he had an affair with. One of the women he had an affair with. And then he got like halfway into writing it and he was like, fuck, this is not working. I need this to be a regular scene. I feel like if it wasn't a sex scene, it would have been so easy for them to like, let's go back. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't he write it like that? Fucking, they go back to his room. She's looking at his bookshelf because she's curious about him. And she takes him and she asks him to read the thing because he wants to establish that Oppenheimer was reading that text because it's the fucking most famous thing he ever said. He wants a scene to establish that Oppenheimer is familiar with this passage. It's a little like on the nose, but okay, fine. Just have them have sex after that. You don't even have to show sex. It feels like a natural... It feels like, I don't know, it feels like Nolan felt like pressure from himself to include a sex scene, and it's super funny. It's really strange. It doesn't ruin the movie at all. It's just kind of quirky. Right. So Oppenheimer is a very flawed guy in a lot of ways in his personal life. And I don't know if this was, but there's like this aspect, there's a question of why did Oppenheimer later in his life campaign against the expansion of nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction? Because he was against the hydrogen bomb project that followed the Manhattan Project. And there's a conflicting interpretation that, well, was he haunted by the effects of the atom bomb? Or was he an egotist and he wanted to be known as the only person who developed the most powerful weapon? Did he want it just to his name? Did he not want to be upstaged? Was it an ego thing? And the film never exactly answers that. It brings up things to imply both ways, but it never gives a direct answer. And And I think that I don't know if this was intentional, but it almost feels like there's an element of symbolism with the fact that he is a quantum physicist, because I am not super up to brush on quantum physics. But I do know a little bit about it, and part of quantum physics, one of the things that makes quantum physics different, I believe, from other elements of physics, from other areas of physics study, is that in quantum physics, one thing can be two things at once. So he's talking to a student that he's teaching near the start of the film, and he's asking him what he knows about quantum physics. Oppenheimer brought quantum physics to America after he studied it in Europe, and he asks the student what light is, and we explain that light is it a particle or a wave, and it's both. How can it be both? It doesn't make sense, but it is. So there's an element, there's a theme of dualism that, almost like a Schrodinger's cat kind of thing. Is light a particle or a wave? It's both, and it doesn't make sense that it could be both, but you have to accept that it's both. What kind of a person was Oppenheimer? Was he a good person or a bad person? In many ways, depending on how you look at it, depending on your perspective, he was both. He was working with something that was a completely new dimension in science, a completely new world. And the way that you look at him from a personal to a broad cultural, societal, world history level will change his identity and who he was, and the morality of him changes drastically as you switch perspectives. And I think that's really interesting, and that's a really interesting angle to take with the character. I want to take a minute to talk about the really impressive script and editing. So the film takes place over the course of Oppenheimer's, not quite his entire life. It goes from when he's around a young man studying in Europe all the way to, I want to say, the last time you really see him is, I want to say the 60s, the early 60s, when he kind of basically retires to be a professor. There is a constant flip-flopping of time periods, and you're jumping all around, and this is where many of the framing devices come in, is that so the largest overarching framing device of the film is the induction of Louis Strauss into the United States cabinet. So the non-US viewers, are they familiar with this process? So the president's cabinet is like the people who oversee the it's the group of people that the president appoints to run various federal departments, like the Department of Defense, the Department of Transportation, stuff like that. And Louis Strauss was a real man who was going after who had a long time relationship and colleague relationship with Oppenheimer. And Strauss he was aiming for the Secretary of Commerce position. So one of the big controversies and kind of uphill battles he had to face before you become inducted into the position of Secretary of a department, you basically have to get grilled in front of you have a public hearing where they ask you why, they grill you on why you should have this position. It's like a job interview. And the big uphill battle he was facing was the way that he handled Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer was suspected of having communist sympathies, because there were leaks via communist spies about the Manhattan Project. He had known associations with communists. His wife was a member of the Communist Party for a brief time in university. There's all these little things. He cheated on his wife with a communist. all these things that bring in his loyalty to the United States into question. And he ended up losing his security clearance, which meant that he was unable to be involved in government projects anymore. He was considered not a communist, but he was considered too unpredictable to maintain a security clearance. Now, don't look up the. I wouldn't recommend, because it's an interesting story of Strauss and his relationship to Oppenheimer. I would recommend not looking it up before the film, because the way that you learn a lot in the last like quarter of the movie about it, and it's basically a lot of him defending his decisions to allow Oppenheimer to do so and so, that kind of a thing. Strauss was he was the chairman of the American Energy Committee, which Oppenheimer was part of, and he was connected to the Manhattan Project via that, and he, I think, kind of recommended him to them. So he goes back and he's talking to, I believe, like his PR guy or someone who's trying to help him, some kind of assistant or something, and he's explaining the story of Oppenheimer to him, and that's one of the framing devices. And then you're seeing the kind of private hearing that Oppenheimer was where he lost his security clearance, like basically a private trial, where and then that stories are told that way, and you're flashing forward and backwards. Some of it in all of the furthest point in time of the Strauss hearing takes place in like the 60s. Excuse me, I want to say, and that's all in black and white, and everything before that is in color. So it's jumping back and forth all the time, and the editing is just phenomenal. Dude, this film is edited in such a cool way. The editing is so cool. It's extremely rapid. It's really fast. I think for some of the dialogue scenes, a little too fast. Just a teeny bit too fast for my taste. But whenever there's a sequence where there's like a lot of things happening, oh dude, it's so good. It's practically montage editing. Just these like fast cuts of things happening, and all you're getting is the information that you need to understand what's going on. And the pacing and the rhythm of the cuts is so perfect. The way that they play like dialogue over it, and then they cut to they'll do like L cuts or J cuts. It's so good. It's really neat. It's not a particularly flashy style of editing, but incredibly, I don't know, it's not flashy, but it's very impressive in my opinion. Just awesome. Just really cool movie to watch from that. For me, from my point of view, like, wow, I fucking want to do something like that. There's the whole scene, dude. The scene leading up to the Trinity test, it feels like a 10-minute segment on its own that just, it starts, and then it just keeps going and going and going, and then, oh, this happened, and okay, well, we got to talk about this, and we got to talk about if this is a possibility, and then, oh, there's the weather, and then we're building the thing, we're going to go up here, and we're going to set up the lights, and it's just this, like, rolling scene, and it all just culminates in this fucking gigantic, the scene, this is a movie that I would really recommend, and this is how Christopher Nolan makes his movies, right? I would really recommend seeing this in IMAX in a decent theater. It's one of those that's really worth it. I think for the bomb test scene alone. That's like whoa. Holy shit. Like I thought, I was like, oh, is it going to be just a big explosion? And it's a lot more than that. And I was like, I don't even want to spoil the way that it's handled. But it was like, wow, holy fuck, I feel it. They were saying, this is a very loud movie. There's a lot of like shadowing of sound and like overwhelming. There's a lot of like noise is a constant thing, like motif throughout the film. It's thoughts that Oppenheimer is plagued by. It'll be like the sound of explosives. It'll be like the sound of a baby crying. There's just loud, overbearing, overwhelming noise is kind of a constant motif of the movie. Just like an unbearable level of sound. And there was a thing that Nolan said before this film came out, that when the bomb went off, or during like especially loud scenes, you'd be able to feel it. Oh yeah, you can. People were joking about being next door during Barbie and feeling the Oppenheimer bomb. Like, oh, that's gonna be me. I'm gonna feel the Oppenheimer bomb. Dude, we were watching Barbie with Oppenheimer nearby, and I felt rumblings every now and again from my theater. And I didn't realize, I was like, what is that? I thought, like, I was wondering, like, is there a train near this theater? And we don't usually, I don't think there's a train near this theater. It'd be weird for the sound to reach all the way here too, and as well. And then, like, I realized, I was like, oh my God, babe, it's Oppenheimer. It is a tremulous movie. But just fantastic. So many good performances. I didn't even realize Robert Downey Jr. was in this. Apparently he shaved his hairline to look like 15 years older. Cillian Murphy is fantastic as Oppenheimer. He has this, I don't know, he sells the horror. He sells like the constant existential horror that Robert Oppenheimer is in before, during, and after the bomb. It's a lot of him staring, but the staring is good, if that makes sense. Matt Damon's really fun as the general. What's her name? Emily Blunt? Yeah. Emily Blunt cries and screams a lot, and I feel bad for her. Florence Pugh, I guess she was pretty good. She's got a nice butt. She has a nice butt that you see. You see her boobies. This is an adult program. The Cellarcast. Who else is in this? Oh, Rami Malek is randomly in it. And I was like, I don't want to spoil what Rami Malek is about, because he's like in the background like the whole film, and I was like, what's fucking Rami Malek doing here? Oh, Josh Peck. Josh Peck is in this movie, and he doesn't play a super pivotal role. Is this even a spoiler? He's the guy who hits the button during the Trinity test, and that's it. He doesn't really do anything specifically crazy. It could have been anyone. They didn't even need to show him, but he's there. They had a guy who pushed the button. I'm still not used to seeing Josh Peck in things. I still find it like I still find it jarring, and it's hard for me to not see him in that. I just feel like I just see Josh Peck whenever I see him in a thing. There's just a bunch of random like actors in this. That's like, I think Gary Oldman is in it at some point. It's great. It's a really good movie. Great performances. Really interesting themes. Great cinematography. Great music. Dude, the lead up to the fucking Trinity, I keep saying, the lead up to that test, dude, I thought I was gonna explode. The tension is insane. Because it's one of those things, like, one of the elements that, if you've seen the trailer, is in the movie, is there was like a very small possibility that when they pushed the button, when they detonated the bomb, that it would cause a chain reaction that would burn up the entire atmosphere. Like, the air would explode around the world. And that's like a thing that had very close to zero, but was like a possibility. And they were like, well, we got to push the button anyway, because like if we don't push the button, the Nazis are gonna push the button. So you might as well find out now, dude. Like it's gonna happen. And thankfully, it did not happen. But because there's a threat, it's so crazy. It's built up to so well, and it's established so well, and the characters are so invested in it that despite the fact that I know the world didn't end, I am on the edge of my seat because the characters don't know if the world's gonna end. Just a great movie. Really good. I would totally recommend it. It's the best movie I've seen since the Before movies. And before that, it was Shaun the Sheep Farmageddon.